word. Okay, before we begin the daf, it's funny. I found a sefer in my house. I haven't seen it in a while. It's called Asifas Akanim on Masechta on Seder Kachim. It was given to me by none other than Yuri Greenwald, and the date is Yud Nisan Tafshin Nun Vav, approximately 20 years ago. Nun Ayin Pei, so approximately 20 years ago. In it, so I just started glancing through it, and there's a beautiful piece by, it doesn't say who the author was, but it says Maimah Torah Or. I'm not sure it was the Torah Chaim or not, but it's a nice piece on why we should learn Seder Kachim. So I thought I would share with you, even though this would have been more appropriate on opening night, but again, it's never too late. Okay. Vidah, I'm going the wrong direction, of course. Okay. So, bo yivur shechiyav limud aseder azeh, the chiyav to learn kachim, mifnei shal yidezeh nishlam la'adam. It's going to complete a person haramach mitzvah aseh ubezeh tushlam kedusha nafshel asid. So, by learning kachim, it's going to complete our soul for lasad lavoy. B'da'oid shalimud seder kachim chiyuv gadol gam mifnei tam echad dehine a tam acher. In other words, he gave previous reasons, and here's another reason. Dina yiduam ashekasu asvarim. Ala kosiv seif davar hakol nishma es elikim yira that's mitzvah shemar, the famous words of Shlomo HaMelech, hakol nishma es elikim yira that's mitzvah shemar ki zeh kol adam ratzel leimar the elikim yarei koilol, the fearing Hashem koilol kol alavim shetzarich lifresh mehen, that you have to separate from if the yiras elikim that's mitzvah shemar hainu l'kaim kol mitzvah. So in other words, Hakol nishma es elikim yira, that's mitzvah shemar. So yiras Hashem is staying away from the mitzvahs lo saseh, and mitzvah shemar is keeping the mitzvahs aseh, and that's the tashlum of the mensch. The bottom line is keeping the mitzvahs, keeping them, staying away from by yiras Hashem, staying away from the lo saseh, and mitzvah shemar but keeping the aseh. Right? Hainu l'kaim kol mitzvahs aseh shetziva Hashem yisbarach lasosan vayidei shmiras hashesal lavim. And by keeping the 365 lavim, lo saseis, v'ramach asayim, and the 240 asayim, nishlim tsuras kol adam. That's going to complete the person. Ki ramach evarim shiva adam, which is gidim mechavdim keneged ramach asay, which is lo sasei. A person who has 248 gidim, that's basar and gidim and an aver is a certain part, and ramach is we said is. If I remember correctly, it's sinus, it's meat, it's tissue, and gidim is literally sinus. But again, the person encompasses 365 and 248. The total is 613. Okay, the 248 is connecting the asayin, and the 365 connecting the los asay. And by the kiyum of these mitzvahs, by fulfilling them, they will give life to the person in the future. In his whole completion. Shekol mitzvah oimer la aver asay mitzvah shebeshvili tiska lasalavai. Each mitzvah says to the aver that in order do this mitzvah for me, that I should be zeicha to the next world in asalavai. Behine lefizeh yesh lanu lishal she'elat suma hatenak bisman shebeis hamikdash kayim hayev shel shtalim kol mitzvahs hatayra b'maisa. When the Beis Hamikdash was around, it was possible to do all the mitzvahs. And even though you're going to say there are many mitzvahs that we can't do because only kahanim, as we know, as we're learning, the kahanim can do the avodah. Similar to that, like in other words, on Yom Kippur, only the kohen gadol can do that. Even the chol yisrael nefesh since we're all one nefesh, nikru u'kamosh akosav kol nefesh haba lebeis Yaakov u'beroiv parshia shebetoira nikru kulam b'lashin yachid. Why is it Lashon Yachid? Because we're all one nefesh. L'chein af ha-mitzvah shetzivanu rak al kahanim uchayetz behen moyel. It helps lashlomis ha-nefesh al-Klal Yisrael. So by the kohen going ahead and going ahead and doing it, it's mashlim. It completes the nefesh, and we are one big nefesh. Ki nefesh echad heim bechlalon. L'chein kasu ha-seif ha-kdoshim al v'zman shein bas ha-migdash kayim halo yechaser me'akol. Mitzvahs merubos. Now that the Beis Hamikdash is not around anymore, we're missing many mitzvahs. Right? Benuyas Aleim. I remember. Benuyas Aleim. Ubema tash tushlam tzuras hanefesh lasalavai. Shurak al yidei kiyim kol haseim v'alavim shebetayras. In other words, when the Beis Hamikdash was around and the Kohanim could do all the mitzvahs that is appropriate for them, that will be mashlamas. But now that the Beis Hamikdash is not around and the Kohanim can't do the mitzvahs, how is it possible for a person to get hashlama? How is it possible to get complete? Ubevadai ein leim achas v'shalom she'Hakadosh Baruch Hu yazlev es kol hadoros karav la'alpayim shana mizman hachurban b'li hashlama tzur nafshim lasalavei. It doesn't make sense to say that God would say, okay, 2,000 years, so you won't do all the mitzvahs, right? It's very short to say that. V'alkein tzorach loymar k'moy shekasu asfarim hasham mitzvah she'yevshel l'kaimon b'poyel, mitzvahs that you can't do with physically, yushlam al yidei halimud, that can be completed through learning them. And going over them. HaKadosh Baruch Hu will consider it as if you're doing it physically. Since you worked hard on them, and you're looking that you should be able to perform them, it's considered as if you did them. Then Lim would say the Kachim chiyuv gadol aleinu. The Lim of Kachim is a tremendous chiyuv upon us. Ma'oid. Shekol ha-mitzvahs hamarubois shetluyin behen, all the so many mitzvahs that are totally in them, it's only fulfilled through limud. That's the only way we can do it. So beautiful piece that the idea of doing this, of learning how important it is to do kachim. You learn mayid, you can do mayid. You can do mayid. You know, those mitzvahs you can do. Nashim, nizikin, we can do. But what? This mitzvah, the mitzvah of kabbanis, we can't do. So how is it possible then for the person to get this the tashlim in his guf, connected the mitzvahs or connected that? Is by learning it. So it's a beautiful deher, and why we should we learn kachim. And in fact, that was the Chavetz Chaim. The Chavetz Chaim wrote a sefer, guys, on kachim called Likutei Halachos. Beautiful, beautiful sefer on kachim, because he felt that two things. One, he was a kohen, and so he had a koilel that the Kohanim should know what to do, Bez Hashem, that the Beis Hamikdash should be built from here b'yameinu. And in addition, he felt learning kachim, guys, as a result, we will go ahead and fulfill all those mitzvahs. It's a beautiful, beautiful idea. So I wanted to share with you before we go back into the nitty-gritty of learning kachim. Okay, very geschmack. So now, we said, just to give a segue, what we saw yesterday. We saw in the Mishnah that there's you can shech kabbanis, and there has to be lishma. However, if you don't do it lishma, it's a kosher carbon, meaning you can do the avodah, you can spritz the dam, burn the murim, eat the meat. Okay, provided it's not a chatas or a pesach. If you shech the chatas pesach l'shem another carbon, it doesn't work. Okay, so the Gemara wanted to know, where did you know lishma from? Where did you know lishma from? So we bought, and there's two types of shinoi. There's shinoi kodesh, where you're going from what? Just going from an oiler to a shlamim, and there's shinoi bailim, where you're going from one person to another person. Good. So we wanted to know, where do you know shinoi kodesh from? And we bought different psukim, and we went through each avodah, right? Remember, you needed shinoi lishma in shchita, in kabbalah, ilacha, and zrika. You needed all four, and we got sources. Then we said, where do you know shinoi bailim from? Where do you know shinoi bailim from? So we figured out that we're going to go ahead and say, well, just like Zvicha over there, we'll say Zvicha over here. And then we ended up, we saw a chart yesterday, either it's a Klalu Prato Klal, or it's from the pasuk of Nirtzer Rapolis, of Nirtzle Lechaper Olav. And so we ended up yesterday's daf great. You had a source for Shinui Kodesh, you had a source for Shinui Bailim in all four avodas. However, those sources, guys, were only in the Shlamim. Those sources were only in the Karban Shlamim. How do you know the rest? And that's today's daf. At least the beginning of today's daf. How do you know the rest? So we're going to begin today. We're on Dalit Amid Beis. Dalit Amid Beis. The second wide line. The first wide line. At the end of the first wide line. Right? The last two words. Ashkin Shlomim, very good. You found Shlomim in Shini Bailam and Shini Kodesh. Shar Kol Kachim Inolam, they have to be Lishma. How do you know all the other kabbanis that they have to be Lishma? V'chitema, if you're going to say, Neilef Mishlamim, you're going to learn from Shlamim, which is, again, the easiest thing to do. However, one pircha knocks you out. Mal Shlamim Shekain Tu'unim Smicha, right? Not every, so most kabbanis do, some kabbanis don't need smicha. Bechor, Maisa Behema, Pesach don't need smicha. So therefore, but all shlamim do. When the Zevachim, some kabbanis, chatas, asham don't need the Zevachim, right? But shlamim does. Snufas chaz of a shok, and no carbon aside from shlamim requires the waving of the chest and the right flank. So in other words, shlamim is meyuchad, and therefore it has these three capacities. It has the din of smicha, the Zevachim, and chaz of a shok. And it's not every single carbon. So Mamela, you would not be able to learn kabbanis from shlamim. Okay, says the Gemara, Ella Amakra. What does the pasuk say? V'zois haTorah, and this pasuk, guys, is the bomb. This puts it all together. Zois haTorah la'oila ulamincha ulachatas ulashlamim ulamiloyim ulazevach ha'ashlamim. Okay, this is the pasuk that somebody put on a joke today on the chat, which I found foolish, and therefore I'm calling out. We don't want bad cartoons on the chat, right? We want only original things on this chat. We don't want other people's cartoons. And Baruch Hashem, that Nassim didn't see it because he'd be angry for a long time. Okay, so now, we put all these in one compartment, guys. We're putting this all in one compartment, right? The Oila Mincha Chatas Asham Uloyim Ulezevach Hashlamim. Hekeshon HaKosav L'Shlamim. The Torah, by putting them together, juxtaposing them together, makes it what? Similar to Shlamim. Ma Shlamim ben Shini Kodesh ben Shini Bailim be'inim Lishma Av kol ben Shini Kodesh Shini Bailim be'inim Lishma. And now there's no questions. Why? Because Eimei Shivan ala Hekesh. We have a rule. You don't ask on a Hekesh. So once you went ahead and we're makish all the kabbanis to Shlamim, that's it. It's totally what? No more kashis. Shmak. Okay. Anyway. Fred Gemara, Ema Heche de Shachet Lahu Shaloi Lishma Lefslu. Okay, now I know the din of Lishma. What was the second din? Kosher Elishlei Olam Shem Chayva. How do you know it's kosher? Maybe it's possible. How do you know? Once you tell me you need Lishma, so by get, guys, why do we say by get? If it's not Lishma, it's no good. Get even stam is no good. And so Mela, if you're telling me you need Lishma by carbon, then why? Is it? Well, it should be possible. It should be possible. That's like Frank. Ema heche de shachelu shalei de shmal lefslu. Makra, the Torah answers, moitzis vasecha tishmar, vasisa kasher nadarta. Whatever comes out of your mouth, you should do like you vowed. Lashem elokecha nidava asher dibarta beficha. The nidava that you spoke in your mouth. So we begin the pasuk by saying neder, which is harei alai. We end up nidava, which is harei zu. Why did you tell me? If you do like you're supposed to do it, it's a neder. And if not, it becomes a nidava, but it's not pasul. It's kosher. It's kosher. So that, again, you're missing the words. You're missing the words over here, kashen redarta. Says, hi nidava, nederhu. It's not a nidava, it's a neder. Ella im kemoshene darta asisa. If you did it like you're supposed to do, yehei neder. Let it be a neder. V'im lav, and if it's not like you did it, yehei nedava. What does nedava mean? It's a kosher carbon. So memela. Okay. Now l'chayra, I have a source, guys, that the carbon is kosher. In other words, you just told me the following: if you bring it like you're supposed to bring it like a neder, great. And if not, it's a nedava. So. Don't I know from here that the carbon that you brought in correctly is kosher? If you did like you're supposed to do, neder. But if you didn't do like you're supposed to do, it's in a dava. So questions the Gemara. So why do I need the hekesh to shlamim? I got a pasuk, maisis v'sechad, right? We have merits. I have two psukim apparently are telling me the same din that if I don't do it correctly, it's still a kosher carbon. Fred Gemara v'itzrich maisis v'secha v'itzrich zeis hatayra. I need both maisis v'secha. In addition, I need the hekesh. If you would have just wrote that, lo yada b'mayik, you wouldn't know what it's talking about. Guys, I know that whatever comes out of my mouth is a neder. And if I don't do it, it becomes a dava. If I don't do what? If I don't do what? In other words, you would know it's shalei l'shma. Maybe if I did it sitting on my head, or maybe if I did it while sitting instead of standing, it's no good. In other words, I can have a million reasons why it shouldn't be good. You wouldn't know Shaloi Lishma if you just had it. Good? Because Rahmana is Zayis HaTorah, therefore it writes Zayis HaTorah, it has to be similar to Shlamim, and we spent all yesterday's share explaining, right? It has to be Zevach Shlamim. It's got to be what? L'Shlamim. It's got to be L'Shma. So you know what? Why I need a second pasuk? To tell me what the first pasuk is speaking about. When does it go from a neder to nedava? If it's Shaloi Lishma. Because Rahmana is Zayis HaTorah, just the second pasuk, Hava Mina Lifsalu. Haha, good. If you just had the hekish, I would say it's puzzle. Therefore, Moitzes V'Secha teaches me, no, it's not puzzle. It's a neder, becomes an nedava. So beautiful, we have two psukim, and both are necessary. I need the Zayis HaTorah to tell me Lishma, and I need Moitzes V'Secha to tell me that it's kasha. Because Rahmana Moitzes V'Secha. Now, this Gemara, guys, I tell you, this is an introduction to a Gemara, I have no idea. Rami Reish Lakish was lying al ma'ohi, says Rashi. What's he lying on ma'ohi? What does Rashi say? Shoichev, the fourth line down, Shoichev al bitnoi. He was lying what? On the ground. Panav klape karka. His face to the ground. So, and what happens? Umakshini asked the question. I'll say, before we get to his question, right? This is a kind of, you don't see this too often, correct? You don't see this. What shteta? So this is fascinating Torah here. Rashi touched it. He's lying on his stomach. We have a Gemara. We have a Gemara in Brachas, fellas. Rabbi Shua ben Levi says he cursed anyone who would sleep on his stomach. You're not supposed to sleep on your stomach. Good. So there it says, it's the lashon over there is you shouldn't sleep prakton. So they learn prakton is your stomach. Rashi guys learns prakton is on your back. Rashi says you shouldn't sleep on your back. So Rashi is not shver over here because that Gemara is the sleeping when you speak facing up and this is facing downwards. But there are other Bishayim in the Rach who says your tak is sleeping on your stomach. So what's going on over here? So I think this is a mistake b'shat. I have Vishinantam. He quotes the Yerushalmi in Brachas Perik Dalid Halacha Beis, and it says Revi'in al Ma'ohin, and it says lying on his face. In other words, fellas, when you're thinking hard and learning, right, and you can't figure something out, what are you prone to do? Guys, watch. You're doing like taklin, right? So Ma'oi does not mean your stomach, according to Yerushalmi. It means your face. So Reish Lakish had a big problem with this Gemara, as we're going to see in a second. And what was he doing? He was thinking like this, which makes sense why you brought it in. At Getrachten Lernen, he had his head down like this. It's very schmack. If he's lying on his stomach, what is adding to the Gemara? But now, if he's sticking on his head like that, so in other words, this kasha really bothered him. So, okay, what was the kasha that bothered him? So very good. Yushalmi, Brachas, Dalid, Halacha Beis. He teaches Ma'oi is what? Nafal al Payim. Makes a lot of sense. So he was lying on his face in Midrashu Makshi. In Ksherim, Heim, Yeratsu. V'eim Meratzin, Lamaboyin. Guys, were you bothered by this hybrid carbon? You tell me on one hand the carbon what is good, but it doesn't count for the owner. Reish Lakish did not understand this kind of hybrid. If it's a good carbon, it should be good for the owner, and if it's not good for the owner, it shouldn't be a good carbon. This was really bothering him. Now, I would answer simply, Reish Lakish, it's a pasuk. So in other words, I have a pasuk to tell me that what? There's a unique din over here. The pasuk's telling me, do it the right way, and if you don't, then it becomes a nedava. So what was his problem? So Rashi tells you he didn't know the pasuk yet. That's why he was troubled. Again, if you know the pasuk, it's not shver, because you have a neder and a nedava. So if you do it correctly, then it's a neder. And if not, it's a nedava, so I have a pasuk. Enachinami. In svara, it makes no sense. There's no svara here to make sense. It's a pasuk, gezeres hakasiv. Most of kachim is gezeres hakasiv. I'm telling you, the sidra, most of kachim are psukim. So l'chayra, what was bothering him? And the answer is he didn't have the pasuk. Rashi says he didn't have the pasuk, and that's why if you look at Rashi, lo mehein bayin, the first small line. It hadn't come up to him the reason of the Mishnah of Meitzvah Sesecha. Geschmack. Good? So now it's set up. Says the Gemara. Amaloi Rebbe Elazar. Okay, Rebbe Elazar was the Talmud Mufik of Rebbe Yochanan. Rebbe Elazar ben Padas. Right? This is so. That's why they take out Rebbe Eliezer. Rebbe Eliezer usually is the Tana Rebbe Eliezer and Hurkanis, which makes no sense over here because Reish Lakish is an Amoira. I'm just giving you a little history. So Amalai Rebbe Elazar. Matzinu beboyin la'achar misa shein kasherim ve'meratzin. You think that it's such a strange thing to bring a carbon, and even though it's what it doesn't work. What about a carbon that's brought after death? None. Now a woman is yuledes brings two birds. One of the birds is an oil, and one's a chatas. Ha'isha she'ivia chatasa. She brings a carbon chatas umesa, and then she dies. Yaviu yarshim oilasa. The yarshim can bring a carbon oila, no problem. Oilasa. If you bring, however, the carbon oila, umesa, now really you should bring the chatas first. But let's say they don't. Umesa, lo yaviu yarshim chatasa. Because this is chatas shemesa by leha. Guys, what? One of the halacha ma'ishmi sinai, chatas shemesa by leha it's of the lemis, right? So memela, why do you see that you could bring a carbon after misa? So l'chayra, why Reish Lakish are you showing incredulous? You see that what? You bring a carbon, it's not meratza because the person's not around, but you bring it anyway. Amalei, so said Reish Lakish, modina l'cha ba'oila, the asya la'acha misa. I'm moided to you by an oila that what? That you could bring after misa. What? Rashi, modina l'cha ba'oila, shim shachta shaloi lishman, shetiskarev. If you go ahead and shech the oila shaloi lishman, that makes sense. Afa pisha eina meratza, even though it doesn't work. Hoyel matzinu sheba la'achamisa ve'ena meratza v'uadin l'shlamim v'shar kabanis. Okay. So in other words, says Reish Lakish, you're right. It wasn't difficult to me the kabanis that you could bring after misa. An oil you can bring after misa, shlam you can bring after misa. That I understood that even though it's not meratza because the person's not around, you could bring it. Chatas we know you can't bring. Okay. You know what I had a difficulty with? I had a difficulty with asham. My problem was the carbon asham. I had a problem with that. That was bothering me. So now, how do you know you would bring a carbon asham after misa? Now, did the Mishnah say you can bring a carbon asham? Come on, guys, say yes. Who? Let's go back to the Mishnah. All Zevachim shenizvu shaloi l'shman kasherim el shaloi oil l'baylam l'shem chayva chutz mi Pesach v'chatas. Pesach b'zmanoi v'chatas b'chol zman. Rebbe Eliezer omer afa asham. So what do you see the Tanna Kama holds? That asham would be good, right? It's Rebbe Eliezer who holds asham not, because he makes asham like a chatas. Good? So my problem is the asham. Okay, so back by us now. So that, in other words, since you can't bring an asham after misa, why, if you bring it, even though it's not meratzeh, so why is it good? It shouldn't be good. Says the Gemara, Amalei, so Rebbe Elazar told him, Hari machlukusacha b'tzidoi. The machloikis is on the side. Rebbe Eliezer Aimer, Afa Asham. In other words, you're right. You hold it. Your question's so good. You hold like Rebbe Eliezer. Even an Asham is no good. So Amar said Reish Lakish to Rebbe Elazar, Zeu shoybim v'lav adam gadlu. They say about you, you're a big guy. Kamina anam Mishnah. I'm telling you a Mishnah Shleim at a Tanna Kama. Yeah, I'm really Rebbe Eliezer. Rebbe Eliezer, guys, lost of love, Allah is going to be like Rebbe Eliezer. But right now in this world, Allah is not like Rebbe Eliezer. Rebbe Eliezer Shemuti who, right? Rebbe Eliezer, he's not. You have a Tanna Kama that Rebbe was Sasim. He didn't say the name of it. That's the halacha. So said Rebbe Eliezer, said Reish Lakish to Rebbe Eliezer. So you want to tell me that Rebbe Eliezer holds like me? That doesn't help me. I'm telling you, according to the Tanna Kama, who says an Asham is good, I don't understand why. Because you can't bring it after Misa. You can't bring it after Misa. Once you can't bring it after Misa, then it should not be Meratza, and it shouldn't be kosher. So Ella Reish Lakish, Eftach ano piskol nafshay. I think I'm gonna have to figure this out myself. In other words, Rebbe Loza, you're not helping me, right? You're gonna help me. I'm gonna have to go ahead and figure this out for myself. Moisiv secha tishma, and he finds the pasuk. Hay nedava nedahu kidel el. In other words, you see, guys, initially he didn't know the pasuk, and now he finds the pasuk. Now that he found the pasuk, it's good. It's good. Now that he found the pasuk, right? Moisiv secha tishma and dava, very good. So if it's the way you're supposed to be, it's a neder. If not, it's a nedava. And once it's a pasuk, there's no svara. There's no svara here. Guys, we're good. Yosef Rab Zera Rab Yitzchak Bar Abba V'Yosef Abaya Gabayo V'Yosef V'Kama Koshel Reish Lakish Asham D'Lo Yosi Lacha Misa V'Nasul Talmuda Moitziv Secha Tishmar Ema Haba Benedo Benedava Lesi V'Lo Lertzi. Why don't you say what? The net that would be more Neda Benedava Lesi you bring V'Lo Lertzi, it should be Maratza Asham Lo Lesi Klal. Guys, what's your source? Look at me, eye contact. Guys, Reish Lakish found out the source. If it's the way you bought it, it's a neder, that's great. And if not, it's a nedava. What sport is a neder? An oila or a shlamim. You can't bring an asham as a neder. An asham is you bring for an aveira, right? You beat this v'sayim, asham shivcha charufa, asham ilois, you bring it for aveira. So aveira, the pasuk you're bringing, right, doesn't help you. I have a pasuk for what? If a neder can become a nedava, that I have a pasuk for. An asham, that can't become a nedava. So if it can't come in Medava, don't bring it at all. Don't bring it. And yet the Tanakama says you do bring it. So in other words, what Reish Lakish, what did you gain? If your whole question was was Asham, and you're using this pasuk doesn't help you. This pasuk is speaking about neder. It's not speaking about. It's speaking about neder. That's speaking about an Asham. Mamish a bomb kasha, but gavaldige kasha. Mamish a gavaldige kasha. So that's a hit. Samula Bayla Reish Lakish. Now he didn't speak to Reish Lakish. He never saw Reish Lakish, right? Amalahu Abaya Reish Lakish mehacha pasach. Okay, the shachar esol lechatas. Okay, and you should shecht it lechatas. Oisol lishma kshera. Achatas lishma is kasha. Shaloi lishma psula. So I have a pasuk that's memayit echatas and only echatas. Again, one more time. The shachar I saw, you should slaughter it lechatas. I saw lishma, achatas has to be lishma, kshera, shaloi lishma psula. Hashar kachim, including an asham, hashar kachim, including an asham, shaloi lishma ksherin. Now, so in other words, guys, before you got to the moitzis vasecha, Reish Lakish began a little bit before. In other words, you're asking that he went from 0 to Maitzis Vasecha. No. He went from 0 to Vishachar I saw by Achatas. Only Achatas is no good. Then, so what? But Asham is good. Now he had a question, why? And then he went to Maitzis Vasecha. Okay? So now, and that's what the Gemara says right now. So, Hashak Kosher Shleishim Kasha, Yachir Tamalam Maitzis Vasecha. Good. Now, so right now we're holding great. Ve'ema haba neda binedava Lacey Veloy Lertzi, Asham Arutzi Nami Lertzi. Okay, let's go the other way, guys. Maybe Nedim and Adava that you can bring and it won't be Maratza, meaning it won't be accepted. Maybe in Asham you'll bring and it would be accepted. Guys, hear what you just said. You went from one end of the world to the other end of the world. You told me initially that maybe Nedim Redavo you bring and it's and what and it's not Maratza. Maratza means that it doesn't help out the balabas. So you proved that that Nedim Redavo and you said that when Chatas is out of the ballpark, only Chatas Asham's in the ballpark. Fred the Gemara, maybe Asham is even better. Maybe Asham is not like Nedim Redavo. Maybe Asham, if Shaloi Lishma, if you bring it Shaloi Lishma, it helps that the owner also is Yaitza. But it's kind of funny. You're going from one end of the spectrum to the other. Okay, we'll go back to it. You get a chance, you look at the sheet of Gubetz's Daled. Make a circle there. You go back to it. He answers the kasha. Okay, anyway. Rabbi, Asham Dimratzi Loy Matzas Amrit. You can't possibly say that an Asham Shaloi Lishma should be even good for the owner. Why? Kal v'chayme ma'oila. Uma oila shlein mechaperes. An oila which is not brought as kapara. Even though it is for carbon mitzvahs safe, there's certain that say, guys, if you don't have there's certain mitzvahs you don't put on tefillin, you bring a carbon oila, but by and large, predominantly it's an adava. You give it as a present. So uma oila shein mechaperes. Ein meratze, it's not accepted. Asham shemechaper ein adin shein meratze. Guys, an asham, this is unique for me. I need this. I need the kapara. You're bringing it shaloi lishma. You have a havamina. It should what work for me. An oila, which what is does not that doesn't work. Certainly, what in svara kal v'chaymer an asham should work. You'll say an asham. You say an oil is burnt. So I can't learn what avakasha in kal v'chaymer. I can't learn asham from oila because an oil is totally burnt and an asham is not. Shlomim yochiach. A shlomim will disprove you because it's not totally burnt, yet it's not meratza. Again, oila, neder and adava, guys. Oila and shlomim are both neder and adava. And this, ayiles malish shlomish came to unim, nesachim, smicha, nesachim, v'tenu v'chazav v'shaik. So oila tochiach, because you don't need tenu v'chazav v'shaik. V'chazav adin, you now put it back into the popper. Loi rizeh krizeh, the chumras of one are not like the chumras of the other. What's the tzad hashava between oil and shlomim? Shein kachim mishachna shlei l'shmon kasherim ve'im meratzim. Carbon's good, but it's not good for the owner. After the yevi asham, I can bring asham shu kodesh u'shachna shlei shmoi kashem ve'im meratzim. Okay, so right now at this point in time, we have a source. Reish Lakish had a problem. His problem was asham. How maybe the Gemara now says the whole pasuk is being is nedav and adava, and the Gemara is finally concluding at this point in time. Well, between Shlomim and Ayla, I could figure out that Asham. Madach Shlomim is no good. My Shlomim needs this. Ayla tachiach. Ayla burnt. They're both kachim. You bring them, they work, but they're not meratza. Afani Asham, which is kachim. I bring it, it's not meratza, even though it's not in the pasuk of Nedav and Nedava. You'll ask, Asham is an individual carbon. You have an oil bit sibur, yes, every day, the carbon tamid. You have a shlomim bit sibur, say yes. Who can raise a hand and get something for the refrigerator? Baruch? 1 second. Baruch, I'm calling Uncle Lenny, he's older than you. Yes, Dr. Lenny. Which shlomim is for the tzibur?
Toda?
No, it's not for the tzibur. Okay.
Shalmi
Shavuos.
Shalmi what?
Shavuos, no?
Shavuos, right.
Shavuos. Shalmi.
The Kivsei Atzeres are Kachei Kadash. You can say a carbon siba. Now, what you should have done, Bachrim, is when I asked the question, you should have gone to Rashi right away. If you look at the bottom Rashi, he goes, Shlamim Sheyeshnei B'tzibur, Kivsei Atzeres. Lenny, the Toida is bought for an individual when he wants to go ahead and say thank you, right? It's an individual carbon. But the Gemara asked right away. Fred, the Gemara upslugs Shikasha. Toida Toichiach. Toida will disprove you. Why? Because Toida is kachim. Guys, what? Toida is kachim. You bring it, it's not maratza. And it's not Bitsibur. So Mela what? I can include Asham also. Amid Beis. That you have the 40 loaves that accompany the taida. They have no loaves. The chazara did. So what do we just do now? We added a third property. Initially, we wanted shlamim and shlamim and oila. The problem was those were only bitsibur, and therefore asham you couldn't learn out from them. By adding taida, which is not bitsibur, then you could learn out what? You could learn out asham from them. Right? So loy rizeh tzad hashav sheben shem kashim v'shachtan shloi l'shmon kasher ve'enim meratzeh afani evi asham shu kodesh v'shachtan shloi l'shmon kasher ve'enim meratzeh. Now that we all understand this, we'll ask a kasha. Again, what's the tzad hashava, guys? Oila, shlamim, and taida. Shehein boyim b'nedum and nedava. That's a bomb. Oila's a neder, guys. Harei alai oila. Shlamim Yeah, Taida for sure. So your three factors that you want to use inside of Shava, you got a pircha. Asham is not boy bin Adava. Asham is not boy bin Adava. So how can you learn out Asham? Shaloi lishma, it should be accepted and not meratzah. That's what we're holding. El Amarava, Zeis Taira. Let's go back to guys. As we opening. Zeis HaTaira la'oila l'mincha l'chatas ula asham ula miluyim. So now included with what? Included in that is asham. So you have the hekesh, ve'imeshivin ala hekesh, right? You makish, hikesha kos l'shlamim, mash shlamim shen kachim. So kachim we've proven shlamim without a shadow of a doubt. Yesh b'shina kodesh shina bailim, u'shachna shlei l'shmam ksherim ve'imeratzin, afani yevi asham shu kodesh. Okay, you good? Okay, so after the whole block Gemara, Reish Lakish had a problem. What was Reish Lakish's problem? Reish Lakish's problem was asham, right? Because in asham, okay, now we said that initially, why did we say that the asham can't be bought after a person dies? La'achamisa, you can't bring it. So if you go back to the beginning of the daf, if you go back to the daf Hey Amid Aleph, Amalei Rebbe Laza, Matzinu beboyin la'achamisa shen kasherim ve'miratzin. In other words, what was your problem? How's it can be this half-breed carbon that it doesn't help? It helps. Look, right? That a woman can bring an oila, bring a chatas. It helps. Right? And even after Misa, you bring in an oila. So guys, just like an oila after Misa. Okay, so now, why did the Gemara say? Why was it difficult to Reish Lakish? Why? Because you don't bring an asham after Misa. So I can't learn out from an oila, which you could bring after Misa. Right? We wanted to know, where do you get this halfway? Bringing it, but it doesn't help. After Misa, you bring it doesn't help. So Reish Lakish said, that doesn't help me, because that's by, I admit, by Oila and Shlomim, you could bring after Misa, and it doesn't help. My problem is Asham, that you can't bring after Misa. Good? Says the Gemara. My chos is the Akish l'Shlomim, Akish l'Chatos, Hamir Rachman Oisa. Okay, a little. Guys, in the Hekesh, right, we said Asham is like Shlomim, and therefore, just like Shlomim, Shloi L'Shma, it's kosher, so too is Asham. In the pasuk says Chatos, so making Asham l'Chatos, just like a Chatos is no good, the Asham is no good. The Shacharei saw l'Chatos, we had a miyat, guys. Dafka Chatos is no good, but nothing else. Good? So Memela, now's the Kasha. Yosef Rav Huna Rav Nachman, Yosef Rav Sheshes Gabaya, Yosef Kamar, Kasha Leil Reish Lakish, Asham Lo Yosef Lachamisa, Leim Le Rebbe Laza, Asham Nami Yosef Lachamisa. Why didn't he say, why didn't Rebbe Laza tell him an Asham's also bought after Misa? He didn't answer him, right? Where do you see an Asham's bought after Misa? Outside guys. Outside guys. An owner separates a chatas. He dies. What's the din? You put it in a cell and starve it to death. Right? You're not allowed to be an abed kosher b'yadayim. That's why it seems like a harsh way to kill an animal. That's what you do. An asham that the owner dies. So roya stavu, you graze it until it gets a mum, and then you go ahead and you played it. Guys, this is a very good kachim to know. We've seen it many times. When you all have a carbon, it has kedushas haguf. Anything that has kedushas haguf, you can't be paida. What happens is when it gets a mum, no longer does it have kedushas haguf, it has kedushas damim. Then you can be paida it. So if you go ahead and let it graze and get some mum, and then you go ahead and paida it, great. What's that rule of thumb? That's the rule of thumb. By the 5 chatash shemesas, the halacha meshvi Sinai is over here. Now, what do you do with the money? What do you do with the money? Yirashi stavu, you get some mum, you paid it, and those money is going to be used for kaitz mizbeach. When the mizbeach is slow, you go ahead and buy. So the asham is achamisa, guys. It's not for following. It's continuing. There's a continuity over here. The money that's going to be used is there's a continuity over here, right? So why did Rebbe Lazar accept Reish Lakish's? I meant asham that's not brought after Misa. He could have told him the asham is brought after Misa, right? After all, take a look. So that's what the Gemara wants to say right now. Says the Gemara. Yosef Rav Huna Rav Nachman Yosef Rav Sheshes Gabaya Yosef Kamar Kashalei Reish Lakish Asham Lo Yosef Lachamisa Leimalei Rebbe Lazar let Rebbe Lazar tell him Asham Nami Yosef Lachamisa Amalu Rav Sheshes Asham L'may Karev L'may Sroi What do you mean achamisa? That you can bring it for its extra money? Chatas nami makir korban maisois. Chatas also, guys. You separate. Listen to this. The din of chapish shekipra ba'aleha is you separated your chatos. It got lost. You bought another one, and showing the original guy shows up. That dies. What happens if you do insurance? You separate two initially, and then you bring one. The other one, you're going to go ahead and do the same thing. That is so you have. In other words, if your svara of continuity is money, it exists by chatas too, and yet a chatas puzzle. It exists by chatas too. And the case would be if you separated two chatois, so that's left over. Says the Gemara. Okay. Amalahu Rav Sheshes Asham Lamai Karv L'Maisoi Chatas Nami Makal Kaisai. So Chatas Afagav the Karv L'Maisoi Miyat Rachmanahu. There's a miyat. Let's see Rashi over here. What's the miyat? Miyat Rachmanahu. B'seir nasi, the seir of a nasi, which is the chatas. Ksiv b'shchitasai v'shacharasai b'mokam asher yishached esa oila lifnei Hashem chatas hu. What does that mean? She yishchatenu l'shem chatas b'mlav pasel. The mashma b'havayasa yehei. It has to be in a state of what? Of chatas. So in vayasa yehei kasher b'mlav pasel. Umino yafinan psul the chatas l'kamam b'perkin. It says who. So in other words, chatas who, it's always a chatas, therefore it's possible. For the Gemara, it says by Asham also who. So in other words, you're telling me the continuity of guys, the continuity of Asham works, the continuity of chatas doesn't work because you have a miyat of who. I have a miyat of who by Asham too. Back in the Gemara, Asham nami ksiv behu. It says behu, and where does it say who? B'saves aroin v'ktiru amizbeach isha Hashem Asham who. Bismanshu l'shem asham kasha v'mlav pasel. So it says who, and for the Gemara, ahu la'acha haktar murim who. That's speaking after you burn the murim. Now, fellas, I told you initially, and I'll go ahead and speak about it all the time. The carbon is, for all intents and purposes, kasha after the zrikas adam. It's the four avodas adam that makes the carbon. It's the four avodas adam that makes the carbon. Even though sometimes the kohen eats and gets the kapara, but for all intents and purposes. So this hu of Asham is Haktaras Emurim. If you would not burn the Emurim, the carbon would still be a good carbon. So therefore the hu over here cannot be telling me that dafke, if you don't bring the shmutz, it's no good. Okay, says the Gemara, Afagad the carbon Asham nami ksivei hu, ahu lach Haktaras Emurim hu. Dechsev kiditanya. Aval Asham loy nema by hu, el lach Haktaras Emurim. Fu atzmai im loy aktiru Emurim kasha. And if you wouldn't, it's, let's say, on a regular asham. If you wouldn't bring the imurim, it would be kasha. So what then? L'shva. Ve'alahu lamali. Why do you need the hu by asham? L'churav huna amarav. Then Rav Huna amarav. Asham shenitek l're'iyah. An asham that you nitek, you said it's got to graze. Okay, the owner died, and you're saying gay grub in the grass. That doesn't make that not grub. Gay essen the grois. That's what I want. That's it. Ge'esen abisal grois to fet the key, right? Go ahead and do that. V'shachtu stam kasha. So you went ahead and you said it's going to graze, and you shechted stam is kasha. Nitek in loy nitek loy. In other words, you had to go ahead and take the shame asham off it. You had to say go graze, guys. This asham, the guy died. Your camping is an asham. You went ahead and you shechted it. It's an oila. When, if you said, the guy said now no longer is it an asham, it's grazing in the grass. If you didn't say grazing in the grass, it's asham hu, and it's not good. That's what I use the hu for. The hu is only as long as you were menatek, as long as you didn't withdraw the name of asham from it, asham hu, and therefore will not be an oila. If, however, you were menatek it, and it didn't get a mum yet, and you shechted it, then it's going to be an oila. Okay, that's what I use the hu for. My time on Makro, who Baba Yasa Yehe. It should be in a state of Asham. Yasi Rav Nachman and Rav Sheshes, Yasi Rav Adabar Masna, Gabayu, Vyasve Vikamar, Hai de Kamar, Hai de Kamar Rabbi Elazar, Matsinu Beboyin La'achar Misa Shenk Sherim, Vemiratzin. Rabbi Elazar said, we find that what? Animals that are brought after, the animals that are brought, we find animals that are brought after the death of the owner, right? And nonetheless, what? That they're not meratza. Leimalei, Reish Lakish. Reish Lakish could have answered them, Hanunami, Laisi Velirtzi. Why don't they go ahead and have the Yarshim bring it, and it'll be accepted. Let the Yarshim go ahead and bring it, and it'll be accepted. So Amlem Ravada Bar Masna, right? V'yoledes imhi yolda, but nehami yoldu. Okay, you brought the chatas when she was alive. Great. You have an oila, right? What are you going to say? That they gave birth? You can't say that, right? Mi yoldu, they can't give birth. So therefore, Ravada said that's why Rabbi Lazar did not retort to him. Rabbi Lazar did not answer him that way. Says the Gemara, the kivon the chiika kama asay gabe mechapra yashahad nami mechapra. Okay, meaning, fellas, well, as I told you, a carbon oila is mechapra for an asay. So this guy's his mother died. She had given birth, and she brought a chatas, and now there's an oila. So you bring it after Misa. Why don't you say they're bringing it for themselves? Guys, why don't you say they're bringing it for themselves? They inherited a carbon, and now they're bringing it for themselves. That's the Gemara's kasha. I'm not bringing it for my dead mommy. I'm bringing it for myself. And for the Gemara, what happens if it's a Yoledes? You're bringing it for yourself? Let's say the Yoledes, guys, had mitzvahs asay that she had needed a kapara for. Would that bird oila be mechapa? Yeah. You're not limited to one. It says it's noila. So just like it'll be mechapa for her, it'll be mechapa if they needed certain things. So therefore, he didn't retort this to Rabbi Shlakish. So Maskal Ravasi, Uman leimelon the chiika kama asay gabo le miskapra, the kivin the chiika kama asay gabo miskapra, it's going to be mechapa, that'll be mechapa for her. Yasher nami mechapa. Now, this would be provided that they acquire it. So I think this is I should have stopped a little earlier. Okay, we'll stop anyway. Gets very involved.